Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's live streaming episode of We'll Do It Live with Meg Hansen. I hope you are all doing well and are safe and healthy. So, to get started with, let me just quickly say that I do this live streaming series on weekdays from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and I'm here to answer your questions. A lot of Vermonters send me questions via email. Some leave their comments here on Facebook and I address them. Broadly, I'm looking at COVID-19 and how it's affecting our lives, whether it's the realm of public health or the economy. But I also discuss other current affairs that are relevant to Vermont and to this particular moment that we find ourselves in. So on April 1st, Governor Phil Scott called for Vermonters who have any background in medicine, any healthcare experience to volunteer because we need more personnel here in Vermont. And as soon as he did it, I volunteered to join the Medical Reserve Corps. And I'm happy to say that I've passed my background checks and now I'm a member of the MRC of Southwestern Vermont. Bennington is where we have our medical, our hospital, our medical unit. And so here I am. I'm ready to serve, ready to help. So my very first thing that I can do today is give you an update. And this I've received as a member of the MRC unit of Southwestern Vermont. So as of this afternoon, we have 605 cases of coronavirus or COVID-19 in Vermont, and 26 patients have died. We have 721 beds that are available, and this is very important information. 13 people who were previously hospitalized have fully recovered and have been discharged. And I'm very happy to be able to share that number with you because I've not come across that number anywhere in our local media outlets. 5 medical surge sites have been set up. So this is because officials expected there to be a scarcity of hospital beds, and so they've had a temporary surge sites set up, and I'll be happy to share with you details about these 5 sites. In St. Albans, we have 50 beds, Barrie 50 beds, Burlington 150 beds, Essex 400 beds, and in Rutland 120 beds. And so because of this, we have an additional 770 beds added to the existing capacity. With the exception of the one in Burlington, all of these sites will also be used for non-COVID-19 patients. So they're expecting COVID-19 patients to overwhelm or take up basically most of the resources in the hospitals that are in these areas, and so they are expecting to move some non-COVID patients into these extra surge sites. The State Emergency Operations Center, which is based in Waterbury, and a Health Operations Center, which is based in Burlington, have now gone online. So they are available for questions, but they'll be working virtually. And Vermont is reiterating the CDC recommendation that when we go in public, we should wear masks. Now, we don't need to wear surgical masks. I think a cloth mask or a scarf or basically a cotton cloth to cover this part, when you go out in public is now recommended even in Vermont. So the good news is that a lot of people have stepped up and there's been an increase in the number of volunteers who are now a part of Vermont Medical Reserve Corps, and we're all happy to serve, and I'll be sharing every update I get with you and keeping you informed of what's going on. Okay, great. So now, as I've said every time, I'm going to keep saying it, that public health and the economy are two sides of the same coin. It's a false choice to have to choose one over the other. And whenever you hear a politician do that, beware and understand that this is a very gross politicization of a very important issue that you should just reject. Both aspects are very important. So yesterday I said that 60,000 Vermonters have filed for unemployment claims. The reports are now saying that as self-employed Vermonters are now able to file for jobless claims, we should be expecting 100,000 Vermonters to be unemployed. And so we have about 520,000 adults, roughly. That's 1 in 5. Am I right about the numbers? Out of a job. This is why it's going to be a problem, a developing problem as it unfolds. So this Friday, Governor Phil Scott is going to announce an extension of the stay-at-home or shelter-in-place orders. Right now, they are up to April 15th, and he has said that he will extend it. Now, he hasn't indicated to what date. This is something that we have to watch out for. Will it be along the lines of Massachusetts, which has extended the guidelines till May 4th, or will it be more along the lines of Virginia, which has stay-at-home orders until June 10th? It's a wait-and-watch scenario, and I'll be here to discuss that with you. In other important news, important for Vermont, Bernie Sanders ended his presidential campaign today. Now, for the rest of the country, it's okay, it's done. This was sort of long overdue, and he didn't have a path, and now that everything has really changed, our whole world has sort of turned upside down, and we are in an unprecedented shutdown of our economy. It was pretty much done that Joe Biden is going to be the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. But Bernie Sanders stayed on, and we had the Wisconsin primary yesterday, and then finally he said today he's done. So that's for the rest of the nation. But what about us here in Vermont? After all, Bernie Sanders is a U.S. Senator from Vermont. He's an independent, but of course he's on the left, further left than the conventional Democratic Party. In fact, he said that in any other country, he and Joe Biden would not belong to the same party because there is such a break in their positions, in their political positions. So I'm bringing this up because this has direct consequences to us here in Vermont. We all know that Bernie Sanders has an enormous war chest. He's accumulated a lot of money. He said that he's still going to collect delegates. He's still going to be on the ballot in upcoming primaries that have been postponed till June. And he's still going to have his name on them, and he's still going to keep collecting delegates because he wants to have a voice in the convention, and he wants to be able to influence the platform, the party platform. Okay, that's fine, generally. But what about here in Vermont? And this is my estimation that we have in our governor's race and lieutenant governor's race 2 candidates who are very close to Bernie Sanders, Zuckerman and Ashe. And I think that there's a lot of financial help that can be expected. Of course, endorsements, and the list that he has. Now, his political career might be pretty much over in terms of national politics, but he can definitely pass the baton to Zuckerman or Tim Ashe. And so there are definite consequences for us here in Vermont that we should be aware of and mindful of. I don't know how the break is going to go between, the Biden and the Bernie faction. They both seem, to say good things about each other following Bernie's announcement that he's ending his campaign. Well, let's see how it turns out. But I think in Vermont, we have to be really mindful of his war chest, especially. I mean, I'm running for lieutenant governor as a Republican, and of course, I'm going to talk a little more about political movements. So I definitely want Republicans to have a voice. But if it comes down to money, then that's a very important factor that we need to consider. We need to keep in mind. I can tell you personally, I've shared this before, I'll reiterate it, that I'm very mindful of Vermonters' finances right now, and we are not soliciting any money as far as fundraising is concerned. Definitely not small dollar donations. I think that is completely out of the question. So, but Zuckerman, actually, he said in his interview recently in Vermont Digger that at the end of the day, you need money in order to reach Vermonters. That's what he said. So you see how you can kind of read between the lines. You kind of know what's happening. I think it's important. It's really important for us that are right of center to understand the great. I mean, it seems crude, and we're like, no, ideas matter. Reaching out to voters matter. But I really want to emphasize again that no matter how crude it seems, it's a fact that money matters in politics. And I mean, of course, that's not all that matters. Look at Bloomberg, he didn't win, but it does matter. It does matter, and we will see some ramifications definitely as Bernie's war chest trickles down to some of our statewide candidates. Now, I'd like to speak a little bit about, just share a word about political movements in general. And the reason is because there was a column today in our local media celebrating Bernie Sanders, saying that although he lost and he's done, he's changed America, he's changed the conversation, and it's a movement, it's a revolutionary movement. So I've seen on Twitter, for example, a lot of Bernie apologists making arguments for why he should stay and keep collecting delegates, and he should have a voice because, he's really changed the conversation. So I think that how does this matter to us here in Vermont? I think it really does, because for those of us here that are right of center in Vermont, right, the home of Bernie Sanders, right here in the trenches, the onus falls on us to articulate our vision for the future. And it's very important to draw a distinction and to clarify that there are two very different visions for how we see our future, how we see governance, and how we see our lives in Vermont and America broadly. And it's very, very different from somebody who is on the American right versus American left, which is now completely consumed, let's say, by progressivism, as we've seen the Democratic Party move further and further to the left. So what I've seen over and over here in Vermont is that because members of the left control our public discourse, whether it's editorials, whether it's columns, media, news coverage, academia, the voices, the talking heads, the people who have commentaries, they are all decidedly on the left. And because of that, what I've seen is that an understanding of the right is nothing but an ugly caricature that is presented from a decidedly left-wing point of view. So, you can be on the left and still present a very fair, a very honest description of what the right believes in. But see, that doesn't really help political purposes. So I've seen over and over, an understanding of views of the political right presented here in the public sphere in Vermont as stereotypes or extremely reductive, narrow, biased, ideologically minded caricatures. That's the best word for it. And my call here is I encourage those of you who are watching and those of you who I'll be reaching out to as part of this campaign, and just as someone who writes myself, is that we should reject it, that we should be bold and outspoken, vociferous actually, and vehemently reject these caricatures because they're just not true. I've used this analogy before. I'm happy to share it again. It's almost as if, think of the Vermont political sphere as a house. And this is a house that progressives have built. What I've seen over and over is when you have people, whether they're elected politicians or let's say writers who are right of center, I've seen their efforts as equivalent to wanting to rent a room in the house that progressives built. Why? Why are we doing that? Because when you try to do that, you are accepting the basic paradigm that is set by the far left. You are inherently accepting the ugly caricatures that are put forth about anybody that is right of center. And by accepting that, you're already on the defense, and then you're trying to explain, no, I'm actually not like that. I'm actually a moderate version. I'm a compassionate version. I'm an empathetic version. And that's all I'm sorry to say, but that's bullshit. We don't need to be on the defensive. When it comes to the founding of this nation, and when it comes to political traditions, if you are on the right of center, whatever you are, whether you're a conservative or a libertarian, or on some issues you feel very strongly, there is a very strong and robust foundation for the right in the United States, and it is decades long. We've had a lot of success in putting our ideas forward. And so somebody would say, oh, let's say Ronald Reagan. You know what? Actually, for me, the best president of the United States, in the modern era, so that's usually people talk about from the Gilded Age onward, which is, let's say, 1870. So 1890 onward is considered to be the modern political era. I would say in the modern political era, the best president is Calvin Coolidge. That's right, Silent Cal from Vermont. In terms of his principles, in terms of what he believed in terms of his understanding of what America stands for, the role of government, the role of citizens, what is a right, what is a responsibility, what is a duty, where to draw the line when it comes to expecting the government to step in or leave us alone. I would say Calvin Coolidge is amazing. Now, people, since the 60s, we know Vermont has changed, right? There's been a lot of people coming and changing. The political flavor has changed. People love to quote Calvin Coolidge. Brave Little State is the name of a show on VPR. People love to talk about his really poignant writing, and they quote from it all the time. But they don't ever pay homage or respect his views. He was anti-progressive when the progressive era actually belonged to Republicans. In the early 20th century, progressive ideas were being fought. They were like, who's going to take it over? Is it going to be the Democrats? Is it going to be the Republicans? And Teddy Roosevelt, who was a Republican, is one of the major progressive thinkers. So there was a fight at that time. Calvin Coolidge stepped up and said, no, we don't want government to decide everything. Government has a role, absolutely, to maintain law and order, to create that space in which society exists. But no, government is not the savior, and government is not the giver of our rights. Now, I'm obviously not getting into the details of it, and if this is a topic of interest, I'd be happy to do that. But my point is that we in Vermont, especially because of Calvin Coolidge, most notably, but generally speaking, we in Vermont, and as Americans broadly, we should be really proud, as I am very proud, of having principles and values and intellectual thought that is profound, that stands on its own, and that is something to be proud of, that respects human nature and respects people, that respects other people's monies and rights, that respects life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, that respects property rights and the Constitution. We have such a proud tradition that we should be talking about that, not apologizing for it, for some caricature that the far left puts forward to us. Now, for me, because I say this, people who have run for office, who in the Republican Party, have said that I have my foot, quote, I have my foot firmly planted in the wacko wing of our party. You have somebody like Anne Galloway, the founder of Vermont Editor, telling people that Meg Hansen comes with political baggage. So I can't really use her as a healthcare resource. Even though she has a medical degree and she has all this experience, I can't really use her or rely on her because she has political baggage. And what is that political baggage? Or what is this wacko wing of the party? This is nonsense, okay? This is what I'm saying about ugly caricatures that are put forward, and then for some reason we have to defend that and say, oh no no no, it's not like this, oh no no, it's not like that. No, outright reject it, just reject it. This is not at all what we stand for. As I said, we have great role models and we come from a really great tradition, and the onus falls on us as Vermonters right here in the trenches, the so-called land of Bernie Sanders, which I don't think so at all. I think this is the land of Silent Cal, the land of Calvin Coolidge, the land of the Green Mountain Boys and Ethan Allen. And it falls on us to articulate our vision for Vermont, the future, our vision for what we see is the duties, not just rights, but duties of citizens, of Vermonters, and how we want, our positions on the various policies and the various political debates of our time. A lot of people are calling the 2020 election as the most significant, the most consequential that will ever be in our lifetimes. And I don't think that's an exaggeration, especially in the light of this coronavirus and this whole pandemic. And I think that it's going to be very, very momentous in Vermont, because it's not going to be the same as it is, say, in Kentucky or Idaho. People are saying in all these places a progressive movement is dead. And in those places it might be, because in the face of this pandemic, all these other things have kind of evaporated. But here in Vermont, where we have a structurally weak economy, we are billions of dollars in the debt because of our poor fiscal situation, whether it's our unfunded pensions or our, disappearing businesses, when we have regulations after regulations, mountains of red tape, draconian regulations, where the state government is the largest employee, when we have all these state monopolies in healthcare, we have so many huge challenges in front of us. And when we have the flag bearers of modern left progressivism right here on our soil, in the person of Bernie Sanders and Bernie Bros like Zuckerman and Tim Ash, then it is on us. Here we are in the trenches. It is on us, and I'm going to use this campaign myself, and I'm going to do my writings and these Facebook live streaming and webinars. I'm going to do my part, but it is not just me, it's all of us together, and it is on us to make a case to say why our vision is better, why it serves the interest of Vermonters in a way that the progressivism and those ideas never will. It is really on us, and I'm going to keep stressing this because it is that important. Okay. So speaking of the obstacles that come in front of us, one of them is the media. And we all know that. We all understand how. Now, I'm not trying to, kick them when they're down. I understand that advertising has dried up. I understand that local newspapers are very important, and I'm not trying to say, oh look, they're having a bad time, so let me beat up on them. No. I was a columnist myself for a very long time. I wrote a weekly column called The Record Straight. It originated with the Eagle Times in the Upper Valley and was syndicated by the Rutland Herald. And I can tell you personally, the amount of people who reached out to me and who wrote to me, there's no parallel to that. I've done a lot of things. I have a show called Dialogues with Meg Hansen on the YCN network. I headed Vermonters for Healthcare Freedom, a health policy think tank. I've done a lot of commentaries and a lot of writing. So in many ways, I've had opportunities to be in the public sphere. But in terms of feedback and hearing from Vermonters, no other job or position, reached out as much as writing for a small local newspaper did. So in Vermont especially, I understand the value of local newspapers. But having said that, it's also very true that the editorials and the Burlington-based media, and I'm going to say VPR is number one. 7 Days says that they are far left, so that's fine. But in many ways, also Vermont Digger, and I'm sad about that because they're supposed to be nonprofit. We see a very, very strong left-wing bias. And I think that when you just say that, okay, that this is our bias, that's fine. But when you don't, and when you pretend to be objective and neutral, but actually you're not, that's going to be a real challenge. Media matters. Media really matters. It influences the way people think. They are gatekeepers. They decide what is news and what is not. They decide who gets to hear what when. So going up against that is a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge. My answer to that is that we need to be our own media. We need to use Facebook, Twitter, email, whatever technology is available, writing ourselves, writing letters to the editor, whatever avenue is available, we need to use that. But at the same time, I acknowledge that you're actually going up against an entire institution. So there's the Vermont Republican Party, there's a Vermont Democratic Party. Okay, so both put up candidates for a race. But as Vermont Republicans, you're also up against VPR. VPR, I'm sorry, but I have absolutely no love for that organization because they are so far left and so unabashedly biased that I'm sorry. And my issue, I take issue with them is because they take taxpayer monies. And that's it. If they were, I don't have a problem with 7 days. 7 days says that they are far left, and that's their private company. Fine. But VPR, yeah, I have a problem with that. Vermont Public Radio, okay. So when you're going up against Vermont Public Radio, you're going up against the people at Twitter who are shadow banning people. You're going up against Facebook, who doesn't, then allow posts to be out there. You're going up against, let's say, Vermont Digger, and on and on. You're going up against Rutland Herald's editorial team, St. Albans editorial team. It's so many different institutions that as a Vermont Republican you have to fight, right? So I understand that. But one way that we can, I said to be our own media as best as we can, to use the avenues that are available to us the best as we can. But another thing is to keep saying that, to keep shining a spotlight on the bias. Because once you make more and more people aware that this is not objective news, this is not neutral, this is a very, very strong left-wing point of view, then it's up to the people to decide, okay, do I want to accept that? Maybe I share those views and I accept that. Or no, you know what? I don't want to accept a far left point of view. I want different points of view, and I'm gonna try and find that. But the only way we can do that is by destroying the illusion that they are objective, that they are neutral, or that they are trying to educate Vermonters. No, they're actually shilling for one particular party, and they're pushing candidates of that party over the others. And the more that we beat the drum on that, the better it is for everybody. I'm not just talking as a Republican candidate. I'm just talking about public discourse and fairness. You want fairness. Everybody has to get a fair shake. And if you want to talk about fairness and equality, well, then everybody should have equal coverage. They're not going to do that. But by beating the drum on that, we can get a point across. And on the very last point, this is something that I just used to ignore, but I can't anymore. So there is a syndicated political cartoonist. His name is Jeff Danziger. His works have appeared in New York Times, Washington Post. They appear in the Rutland Herald as well. And Vermont Digger carries them a lot. And of course, it's a cartoon, so it comes with a point of view, and the point of view is far left again, which is fine. A cartoon is a way of editorializing your point of view, so it's always a very far left point of view. And I've looked at it. I find them personally to be not funny. I think that they are distasteful. I think that sometimes they're outright hateful, and many times they're inaccurate. But I understand that it's a particular point of view. Unfortunately, I never see the other point of view, and this is why I have a problem. If Vermont Digger is a nonprofit, and we talk about fairness and equality, why can't you also have some right-wing point of views? Why can't you have a cartoon where the cartoonist is editorializing from a right-wing point of view? So I've seen it a couple of times and I've ignored it, but today's really bothered me. It says, U.S. Supreme Court okays Wisconsin Republican efforts to limit voting. Really? So Republicans want to limit voting? So we're just going to accept that? Is that really the point? If anything, if you want to talk about Wisconsin and you want to talk about the Wisconsin primary that took place yesterday and endangering, if you really want to say, oh, look, there's a distinction between having a fair, free primary election versus jeopardizing public health, then why not ask Bernie Sanders why he didn't drop out yesterday or the day before and prevent people from having to go and do the primary? He didn't do that. He had one more day one more election, he forced people to go out there and choose between himself and Biden so he could have one more day of his vanity project. And then today he drops out. He could have saved everybody the trouble by dropping out on Sunday, but he didn't do that. So no, you're not going to talk about him and his role in this. Let's say that's the argument. No, you want to talk about Wisconsin Republicans limiting voting. Really? This is what I mean about ugly caricatures that I put forth and how we should not be in a position of defense where we're trying to explain and apologize and somehow curry favor with the progressives. No, I don't want to rent a room in the house that progressives build. I'm going to build my own house, and there's a very, very strong foundation for it, and I'm very proud of it, and I'm very happy to be using this particular campaign. And I hope you will join me in making the case for why we have our own house, our own conservative house, our own Republican, our own right of center house. We don't need a room in their house. We have our own case to be made, and we're happy to make it. I'll be happy to make it, and I hope you'll join me. So, as you know, I get very passionate. I'm very passionate about these issues, especially when I see unfairness, when I see that really riles me up. I really don't like unfairness, and I really don't like, when people in power or people with positions of influence use that to rig the system in their favor against the average Vermonter. I really have a problem with that. So anyway, that's it. That's it for today as far as our topics are concerned. I'll be back here again at 6 p.m. tomorrow. I hope you'll join me. As usual, you can send me your questions at info@Hansen, Hansen, for Vermont, spelled out.com, or you can leave your comments here on Facebook, and I'll be happy to acknowledge them tomorrow. So have a good evening, stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!